Well, good morning, everyone. And believe it or not, we are in Charlotte, North Carolina today. So don't look out the window and think that you're in Detroit, Michigan, or somewhere in Snowbelt. But actually, Snowbelt has come here to Charlotte. So welcome to this morning to Net Inclusion 2019. And I just want to thank NDIA for just putting on such a really great conference. So let's give them all a hand for that. I'm really excited about our session today. By the way, my name is John Gant, and I am actually the Dean of the School of Library and Information Sciences and professor at North Carolina Central University. And I see some of my colleagues here, and I see some of our Raleigh-Durham friends in the area as well. And I've got the great honor today to serve as the moderator for this very important panel. The focus of this panel is about data. And how do we measure, how do we know that we are actually capturing the right information to understand the impacts and the outcomes of the various activities around digital inclusion, digital equity strategies. And so we've got three great panelists with us today. And our strategy is to start off with Leana Mayzlina, who's going to give us insight from NTEN, where they work with a large number of organizations through their fellows program. And they really got this big task of trying to figure out how do we look across all of these different places where their fellows are serving in various communities, and do it in such a way that we can learn across each one of those instances in terms of measuring and so forth. It's given her a lot of insight about ways of trying to find common things to measure. You can think about the benefits, but there's certainly a lot of shortcomings of that approach. So then we're going to go drill down from there, and then we'll have second will be Samantha Schartman, CEO of Connected Insights, who's going to drill down and say, what are some good systematic approaches for collecting this data? What are great tools for doing that as well? And then how do you do it on a budget as well too? And then we'll conclude with Dan Noyes, CEO of Tech Goes Home, and Dan's going to say, how do we scale? All right, how do we scale based on his experience with Tech Goes Home? So we've got the three panelists today. We're going to try and keep each panelist to about 12 minutes or so to be able to ask questions at the end of each panelist, and then we'll save about 10 to 15 minutes at the end to try and synthesize and also to learn from you about your experiences working with data and measuring and so forth. Okay? So with that, let's kick it off with Leana Mayzlina, Senior Digital Inclusion Manager for NTEN.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Awesome. So I am Leana Mayzlina, as John said. I am the Senior Digital Inclusion Manager at NTEN. NTEN is an organization, for those of you who are not familiar with it, that helps nonprofits build capacity and use technology better to meet their missions. So we do everything from professional certificates to courses to conferences, whatever it takes to help nonprofits learn to use tech so they can make the world a better place in every way possible. And I look around the room and see people that have been involved with NTEN for many years, Kimmy, and other folks. And so the Digital Inclusion Fellowship is a program that we launched about 4 years ago in partnership with Google Fiber. And the goal of the fellowship is to build capacity in nonprofits to do digital inclusion work. So over the last 4 years that we've had this fellowship, we have helped fellows across the U.S. Either create new digital inclusion programs within their organizations or expand the impact of their already existing ones. The fellowship is a year-long cohort-based program where fellows develop projects, and we support them throughout that year with training and capacity building and coaching and support and small project grants to make sure that those projects are successful and they're sustainable and they make a huge impact. We have, since the very beginning of the program, thought about how we can collect data and analyze that data and make sure that we are doing the work we think we're doing and that we want to be doing. But the fellowship is unique in some ways. and it has some unique challenges in terms of how we actually get all that information. So some of our biggest challenges have been that from year to year and from fellow to fellow, we have such a diverse group. So we are working with, for example, in the current cohort, we have a tiny rural library in Oregon, doesn't even have a restroom. Like, it is small, and their impact is small, and what they can do is small. We've worked with massive libraries. We've worked with adult literacy organizations. We've worked with refurbishers, and all of those organizations have very different programming and very different communities that they serve and very different needs. And so when fellows develop their projects, they're developing projects that are unique to those communities and those needs. So how do we capture data? How do we understand what the fellows are doing when all of them are doing completely different work? And that work needs to be different because it needs to accommodate and be responsive to the communities that they're working with. So that was and is one of our biggest challenges. Another major challenge is that we are not the ones doing direct service to the communities. So NTEN does not provide digital literacy training to anyone. It's the fellows that provide it. So if we are not interacting with the participants themselves, that makes it even harder to try to get data or get information, because there's another layer there of complexity. And then lastly, all of these organizations, for the most part, already have their data collection strategies. They already have the ways that they've been doing this work, and so we don't want to overburden them or create anything that's going to conflict with how they already do their work, because our goal is to create capacity and not give them more work to do. So I'm going to tell you two little stories of how we have addressed some of those challenges. One is around how we've tracked the actual direct service component of the program, the work that the fellows do, and then the other one is around how we've tried to capture how we as a program are building capacity or not building capacity. So in terms of the direct service that the fellows do, we started the program off thinking very deeply about how to do this well and how to capture the data, and we put a lot of resources towards developing a really, really complex and robust tool. So that tool, after months of work and months of partnership with different organizations and lots of time commitment and emotional commitment, we created a very complex, very robust tool that we were really excited about, and we rolled it out, and it was not great. I feel like the best way to learn is by accepting that there's sometimes failures along the way. And when we started having the fellows use this tool, it was not a good experience. We realized very quickly that it was way more complex than it needed to be. It asked for all kinds of information that was not really reasonable or feasible for fellows to try to be collecting. And also, we didn't even know what we were going to do with that data. So we were collecting it for the sake of collecting it, and not necessarily because we had a goal in mind for what we were going to do with it. So we ended up, talking to the folks that were going to be administering this, the fellows and the host organizations and the partners that we worked with, and trying to understand, what is it that you would want in this tool? How can it serve you better? And so with that process in mind, we arrived at a massive simplification of the tool. So we just, we put aside the fact that we had gotten emotionally involved and spent a lot of time and resources, and realized that really the best tool for us in this case is a simplified tool that captures things that can be measured across different organizations and different programs. And even if those are very simple things, they're the ones that we actually need, and they're the ones that are going to help us understand what is happening in communities and the impact that it's having in communities. So that's the first, our first approach to how we capture the direct service part of the program. The second part that in some ways was harder is trying to understand the capacity building aspect of the program, because it's not something that is as often measured, especially in the digital inclusion space. And so we had to create a way of measuring that. So that started with developing a logic model, which we had all thought we understood what our objectives were, but it wasn't until we sat down and talked across the organization, across the partners, to understand what are our objectives, what is our logic model, how are we doing this work. And And from there, we try to assess, are we actually arriving at our objectives? Are we actually building capacity in organizations? Are the fellows becoming leaders in their communities? And so all of that information is information that we had started collecting from the beginning of the program. So we had been doing some surveys, we had been talking to folks, and we had been tracking that, but we hadn't had the time or the capacity to actually analyze that data and understand that data. So last year we embarked on a pretty massive undertaking to use that already existing documentation, and in addition do some surveying and looking at other archival data and trying to figure out how we use that data to actually assess if we're meeting our objectives that we set out. And so that anecdote had a much more successful result from the beginning. We did this massive project, and through all the interviewing and all the other data that we had collected, we realized that a lot of our objectives are being met. So we defined what capacity building and leadership looks like to us, and we assessed some of those indicators around, for example, after the fellowship year, does the organization continue to do digital inclusion work? Is there sustainability within that? We also asked fellows, after you were a fellow, did you continue in the digital inclusion field? Is this something that are you bringing a digital inclusion lens to future work, even if it's not specifically in this space? We also asked some questions around, is digital inclusion being integrated across the organization? So, to us it's important that there's not one standalone digital literacy class, because that's typically not super sustainable, but are the other programs in your organization understanding that digital literacy is a part of their work? And are they including those components, and are they planning for it in a strategic and sustainable way? So, after we analyzed all of those interviews and all that information, we got some great results around, yes, there is capacity being built, and we need to continue doing this work, and we need to make some modifications, but overall we're succeeding at what we think we're doing. And it was great information for us to be able to speak more confidently and feel more confidently about the program and continue to improve the program. But we also, in that process, understood that it is a really, really massive undertaking to do that kind of analysis. And so it's not something that we can do every year. We can still collect the data and the information, but we can hold off in actually analyzing that data and maybe do it every 3 years or every 5 years. It doesn't have to happen all the time in every moment for it to be useful to us. So some lessons that I wanted to share with you all that have been really useful for us and hopefully can be useful for you. The first one, and I'm curious to see what the other panelists say about this, because we had some conversations earlier, but for us, simple is best. You can create the most complex tool you've ever seen, and if people think it's a burden or if it's too unwieldy, they're not going to use it. And so at the end of the day, you can have a fantastic data set that no one knows how to use and that you're not going to analyze. So sometimes just sticking to what you know and sticking to the simple and sticking to things that are actually going to be tracked is the most successful way to go forward. That was, I think, our biggest lesson. A few others were that when you are building a tool that you're going to be using, you really need to involve the people that are going to be administering that tool. Because if you don't have their buy-in and they don't understand why you're collecting this data or how it's going to be useful to them, they're probably not going to do it. Or they might do it, but their heart isn't in it, and so then your data might not be really useful. Think about how you're going to use the data before you start collecting it, because I think all of us suffer from wanting to get all the numbers and all the data and all the stories, and if it's just gonna sit in that database forever, and you don't have a purpose for it, then why are you spending your time doing that, right? So have your goals in mind before you start creating the tool, and don't let the tool guide your decisions about what you're going to be collecting. And last but not least, these folks know that one of my favorite expressions is, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Your tool does not have to be perfect. It will never be perfect. There's no such thing as perfect. So if you're going to wait until you have a perfect tool to roll it out, you're going to be 20 years into your program and you're not going to have any data, and then you're going to be kicking yourself. So I think you just have to start start where you feel comfortable and where you feel like it's good, and know that it can evolve. You can make tweaks to it. It can still be a living data collection tool, but don't wait until it's perfect, because you're never going to get there.
So 3 great lessons there, and we got time to take a few minutes for questions directly from Leana. Any, put you on the hot seat. Yeah, right here. And I'll repeat the question so everybody can hear it.
My name is Sarah Brady. I was a fellow. I'm not plants.
Hey, Sarah.
I'm curious, what technologies or what software does NTEN use to analyze data?
So that's Sarah. She's not a plant. She wants to know what software does NTEN use. So use the microphone. Yeah.
That's a great question. Thank you for not being a plant. So I feel like our story of how we process that data relates to the first anecdote of not making things too complicated. So when we first rolled out a tool, we had like all kinds of fancy like pivot tables and Excel spreadsheets and some software that I honestly don't even remember the name. I think I was too traumatized by the entire thing. But now, essentially, we just use Google Sheets, and that's where we track everything. And then we, for the capacity building part of it, that was a lot of human brain power. Because a lot of it was essentially, most of it was qualitative data, so there was a lot of hand coding for categories and then processing all of that, doing transcription of everything. So we just honestly have stuck with the basics, because at the end of the day, that's what makes our lives easier, and that's what gives us the best data that we can actually use.
Good. Any other questions? Yep, right here.
What kinds of things are you tracking for the direct services?
So the question is, what kinds of things are you tracking for the direct services piece? We can watch that. Yeah.
So what we track for direct services is mostly around outputs. So we track, for example, training hours. So how many folks are in a class at any given time, times the number of hours that they're in it. We track lab hours. So when folks expand or build out their computer labs, we track that. We also track the number of both new and returning participants that are participating in the programs. And then we do tracking around volunteer and staff training, so trying to track the train-the-trainer component, and then how many folks those people are in turn training. And then in addition to that, for the direct service piece as well, we collect some qualitative data as well, so just good stories of impact that we can use to tell the story of why digital inclusion, digital literacy are important.
Yeah, so we're out of time for this part, but yeah, it's a good point about what would call more of a mixed method approach, especially the storytelling, because at the end of the day, you could have the numbers, but you've got to be able to relate it to the folks that you're serving, your team that are providing the service, as well as external stakeholders, and those stories are really what have an impact, especially if you've got a good headline about those stories as well, too. So great, so thank you. So next, we've got, let's give her a hand, yeah, thank you. And so next we have, let's see, yes, it still works. All right, Samantha Schartman from Connected Insights. So Samantha.
Thank you, John. Let's see, how do I know how this works? Yay, all right, I do. Woo-hoo. Hi everyone, how is everyone doing today?
Great.
So my name is Samantha, I'm from Connected Insights, and I'm here to talk about tools and data. So for those of you who don't know me, I am one of the children of BTOP, so I had a role in yes, there's many of us here. Yeah, I helped to design the data and evaluation tool for Connect Your Community, and we train 33,000 people in 5 states with over about 100 staff members and trainers throughout those several communities. So it was a really large effort between 2009, 2012. If you have seen my name attached to research, you'll know that I've done also a lot of survey research, stories, longitudinal data, all of that stuff. So that exists out there, and feel free to check my website at connectedinsights.org if you want to look it up. But today I am trying to going to give you a little peek at a new resource that we developed that's really based on 10 years of experience working with programs like the ones you run. It is a labor of love. This is something that we want to offer as a resource. So I don't want to talk too much about data. So, we all know that data is important. So I'm not going to give you the pitch as to why you should be collecting it. I think we all know that we are. But I am going to ask, how many people are with programs? Most of us. How many funders are here? People that are, funding community. Great. So this is a tool that will do a lot of different things. But it's not the only tool out there, right? There's a lot of things and a lot of resources out there in the universe if you have the funding to do so. So Salesforce is a great tool. There's Sugar. These are different CRMs. You can design your own access database. Unfortunately, more than often than not, the people that I've worked with across our communities are small nonprofits that are doing this, with duct tape and toothpicks to get by, right? We're trying to struggle to do this, and yet we need to compete with other larger, more robust organizations in order to compete for those fundings. And many of these organizations are getting by with, collect intake on paper and Excel spreadsheets, if anything. If you're really lucky enough to afford a large, robust program, then that's great. I'm not here to say that this is the end-all, be-all, but it is something that is a lot less expensive. So, Ditto. Ditto stands for Digital Inclusion Technology Training Outcomes, and it is the first ever cloud-based, mobile-optimized CRM and class tracking instrument for the digital inclusion community. It actually works for anybody, all nonprofits that are class-based, really, but it was designed by digital inclusion leaders for digital inclusion programs. So what is it? There, I think I already skipped ahead. I'm ahead of myself. So I just want to show you something. If I had a little bit more time, I'd go through a full demo. It actually takes only about 30 minutes to train someone to use this tool. It is extremely simple. We collect data that is aligned to census and ACS categories so that you can align your data with the national data sets and see how far you're moving the needle. These are just a few, there's many screenshots here, so I didn't want to spend a lot of time, but we create courses. Courses are so this is not prescriptive of the content or the type of course that you're running. So you design your own course here. You describe it, you give it keywords, all of that. It is now searchable by keywords, so you can say how many times you've trained internet security, throughout, and that might be over multiple different classes, courses, and time, but you can now query that throughout your entire data gathering existence. You can assign instructors, you can assign supervisors to oversee the instructors. You have a regional focus, so you can break your data out by region if you are like one of our main users, which is the National Digital Equity Center in Maine. They're a statewide program, so they're using regions as a way to break out their counties because they have 16 counties, and so within those areas they have locations. So this supports all of that. You define it, not us. It's not prescriptive in any way. And this is kind of what it starts looking like when you actually schedule classes, which are scheduled instances of your courses. And you are able to enroll, take attendance, etc. So it's really simple. I mentioned a lot, some of the tools out there today are robust. They have more bells and whistles than Ditto does. This program was designed to be as simple as humanly possible. Something that does not take a learning curve. You don't have to take classes to learn how to use it. A quick 30-minute tutorial should give you a pretty good overview. So it's accessible by all skill levels, which of course we know as community organizations, half the time we're using volunteers, unpaid volunteer hours, and we're not hiring computer science, majors to do this. So, we want it to be easy. It does all of these things, and it is currently $300 a year. We made this, and I don't want it to be deceiving as far as that is an indication of quality. I would hope those that do use the tool would say otherwise, because we've spent an awful lot more than that to build it. But this is our mission. We're here. We have my entire career has been in support of programs like yours, the ones that you work with or the ones that you are advocating on behalf of. The reason why you are here is why I'm here. And I'm just trying to give everyone the ability to start collecting simple, basic data that is standardized and validated in a clean way. While you put in data into this, you are able to push a button and get it out. It will download to Excel, CSV, things like that. Every single table view, like you saw classes view, those are all exportable, so you can filter in real time, export it at every stage of the program. So it's highly, highly flexible, I think is the word I was looking for. It's highly flexible for users. We're not trying to run interference, and by offering something and now you have to engage us. We will be there as a support structure. Digital Connected Insights does offer support as far as helping those that might need more advanced capabilities to do manipulation and analysis, but there's nothing that bars you from doing it yourself or with another contractor of your choosing, however you do that. But this is something else that we're trying to start the concept of, is Ditto's more than a piece of software. It's a model for a data trust. So Connected Insights is launching this year a concept called the Connected Insights Digital Inclusion Data Trust. And this is going, let's see, do I have another one? So what is that? What does that mean? I've said this many times, and anyone who runs a program knows this. Funding is hard to get for digital inclusion, right? There isn't a clear national, funder. We often have to say, oh, but we make such a great impact to financial, to housing, to education, right? To healthcare, and all of those things are true, but we end up becoming a side dish instead of the main course. So the goal here in the long arc is really advocacy. Because if we start collecting the same kind of data, and if it's aligned to, approved standardized data sets, we can start as a community to talk about a national impact. Wouldn't it be great to say, oh, last year, collectively, the digital inclusion community trained 120,000 people across the country. That would be great, right? And I think that's at the point where there's a little bit of a tipping point where we might start getting the attention of national funders. So our hope is that by offering you guys some tools to better do this, to make collecting data easy, to make using the data from your programs easier and more accessible and low cost, that as a community, this becomes something that we can all start to collaborate on to move the needle on in a support from a support structure, from funders, from national organizations. Because the work that you all do is incredibly important. It is, and it touches every aspect of those that we serve's life. It really is quite far-reaching. And I know that because I have the data to prove it. And I'm not here to talk about that today, but I do want to offer this to anyone who it would help. So together, let's not just tell stories and let people write off as like, oh, this is just the exception. If we start collecting all of this, if everyone pitches in, I think we can make digital exclusion history.
Yeah, thank you, Samantha. Got time for questions? Oh, a lot of hands. We'll start here in the front.
It's not a license thing. It's literally you just have access. So however many people as you want to use it at this point. That sets you up, and that basically pays your server costs. It covers half of the server costs, to be honest.
And then just a follow-up question, I'm just curious, are you guys looking at trying to integrate this into some of the, so as a funder, we use the grants management system, we have vendors that we use for our grants management.
Sure.
Are you talking to those grant managers, because some of their survey tools are not top-notch?
Right. You know what? We aren't. We aren't, not in the funding community, because you know what? There are so many. From what I understand, there's quite a lot of different systems that different foundations and organizations use. Some of them are proprietary, like United Way has their own system that's just for the United Way, and some others use more commercial things. But there's so many. It's too hard to do that, to be honest. But what we are doing is we are looking more on the practitioner side to build bridges to, say, North Star assessment curriculum. That's something that we're already, looking at. We're looking at creating connections to SurveyMonkey through an API so that you can start doing survey and connecting it to the what I call the node data, the participant information data in real time. So these are things that are in the works, and the more of you that start using the platform, I think the more ability that we will have to develop these ideas. But they are in the near term. They're already clearly earmarked, and we know what they cost to make, and so they're on our to-do list. Anyone else?
We got a microphone now too, so we're evolving.
Nice. Wonderful.
Who did you point to?
Oh, over back here.
Hi, my name is Marty Chambers, founder of Hack and Hustle Academy. Just wanted to find out how easy it is to customize and add our own metrics to the data that we want to collect.
Well, it is very easy. That's one of the things, when you kind of own the platform, you can pretty much do whatever you want with it. It's really whatever the developing cost is to us, we would pass that on to you. We're not looking to make money on developing that. There is a way for us to say, is this something that everyone would want, or just a change for you? I mean, because ultimately this is a platform that, multiple users would use. So it's a discussion. It's not all that expensive. It would be far cheaper than a Salesforce customization, that's for sure.
I meant, was it something that I could do easily on my own, but I'd have to go through you to contract to modify the platform, you're saying?
To modify the platform. Now, if you're asking how do you set up your account and start using it, because define courses and all of that, that's what I'm talking. That's the base functionality of Ditto. You don't need anybody to do that. You can create your own courses. You can do this within 15 minutes. I can set you up in 30 seconds with an account. You upload your own logo, your own color theme. Within minutes, you can have that done. You create your own courses, your own locations, regions. All of that is something that you would do as the user and with no additional fees whatsoever. Now, if you are, say, unhappy with the types and number of questions that are on the participant intake profile, and say you think that there needs to be additional questions put into the form, now that's when it becomes more of a developer software design question, right? And we're open to that. This is made for you guys. So if you have great ideas that we didn't think of, we're welcome to hear those and help you implement them. And it certainly is not that expensive to do, really. But as far as that, your setup, you can design that yourself.
One more quick question.
Yeah, I was kind of building off her question a little bit. There's two questions I had.
Sure.
Is there
One of
a
the two.
data? Is there a cap on the number of participants? It sounded like it wasn't, right? I just wanted to clarify that.
Not at this time.
Okay, and can you
Nope.
speak towards you said y'all leverage census tracks. Could you speak towards some of the data metrics that you all use from the census tracks?
Yeah. Okay, so this is actually, if you're looking at the participant, this is like the bottom of it. So this is basically it. Now, if I expanded those menus, you would see those are, all of the drop-down selections in these categories are directly aligned to both census and ACS data. So all of them are the same question choices. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Good. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. How do I don't know.
Good.
I'm not
Thank-
sure what to do.
Yeah, thank you, Samantha. Yeah, thank you. And again, we'll have, after Dan, we'll have some additional time for more general questions as well, too. So next, let me introduce Dan, who will talk about how he scaled the measurement and data collection as his organization grew as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning, good morning. First, I want to give kudos to all the people in the room who raised their hands when you asked if they're funders, because I know everyone in the room probably looked over and was like, ooh, they're a funder. I also want to give kudos to Angela for picking a city that is 20 degrees colder than Boston right now. I thought I was coming to the balmy Charlotte area, and now I have snow. My name is Dan Noyes. I'm the co-director of Tech Goes Home. We're a Greater Boston digital equity nonprofit. When Angela asked me to do this panel, I immediately thought of a story that I was having a conversation about 2 years ago with a potential funder, and I was like, oh, well, what is Tech Goes Home's impact? And I recited, we've given out 20,000 computers, we've served 30,000 people, we do 5,000 people a year, and she shook her head and said, yeah, but what's your impact? And it really dawned on me that I did not have a good answer to that question. I knew anecdotally what the impact was. I had all the heartstring stories that many of you have yourselves, and that's awesome. I didn't have the data to back it up. So this started our journey where I'm going to talk today about what we do and how we got to where we are now. So basically what Tech Goes Home does is we seek to empower communities so they can access and use digital tools to overcome barriers and advance lives. But much more simply put, we get computers, internet, and life skills training into the hands of those without, so kids can do homework, adults can find jobs, seniors can connect to loved ones. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but we serve people 3 to 93, giving them the skills and the access they need to succeed. About 3 years ago, we started the strategic planning process to try and grow. And one of the big questions was this data piece. How are we going to do this? So we, like a number of people have talked about, we were using Google Forms and Google Sheets, and it was really great. I mean, Tech Goes Home, when it started 20 years ago, had 37 people graduate in its first year, and that's fantastic. But now that we're up to, I'm proud to say, we're up to more than 5,000 people a year. I discovered that, at least at the time, there's actually a cell limit in Google Sheets. And the way we found out is that all of a sudden, we're getting these error messages from our surveys that were coming out saying, you don't have any more room. So that was a nice moment of saying, we need to do something. So we have moved on to a Salesforce system. And the reason we did that is because I needed, one, something that could have the capacity to handle all of that data. But then two, we wanted to be able to attach data to those heartstrings. We knew we needed to create those pathways of data, because I could ask any moment in time what someone was feeling and what they were doing. But what I needed to do is I needed to look at person A at one point in time? Where were they a month after the course ended? Where were they a year after the course ended? Where were they 5 years after the course? And look at that data by the person. So an example of this is, we used to ask people when they ended their course or a year later, what was the impact on Tech Goes Home as it relates to job seeking? Education and jobs tend to be the two biggest things people care about these days. And we had really good aggregate data, but I couldn't define it based on who didn't have a job at the time they were taking Tech Goes Home. So the percentages when we asked those questions said, okay, X% say, Tech Goes Home helped me find a new job, but I knew that half of the people in our courses already had jobs, so the data was off. But with our new system, I'm able to say, okay, I know that of those who were unemployed at the time they took Tech Goes Home, 84% of those unemployed people 1 year later say that Tech Goes Home helped them find a job. And the reason that's really important is that one of our biggest funders, who is a bank, specifically asks us for that exact piece of data. And everyone knows if you don't have the funding, you can't run your program. So what I just want to quickly talk about is what we use Salesforce for, and I hesitate, I don't work for Salesforce. I want to say up front too, that, and you had this in a slide, Salesforce is really good at saying it's free for nonprofits. And it is, it's free. I don't pay Salesforce anything. I did spend $75,000 customizing a Salesforce database. But what we did is we found a capacity building grant that funded that. But that doesn't include the 1.5 years of staff time that it took to develop it. That said, I'm happy we did it. I am so happy that Ditto now exists. I wish it existed 4 years ago. I would highly recommend, if you guys are going down the data path, definitely talk to Samantha. So some of the stats we're able to find now are, I mentioned the job piece. We now know that of people who took Tech Goes Home with their child, 67% say their child's grades improved. That's a stat we couldn't say before because we couldn't differentiate between who took it with a kid and who didn't. We know that 93% of families that take Tech Goes Home with their children, 93% say that their child is using their laptop 3 times a week for educational activities 1 year later. So again, these are data points we can go back to. Another thing that's been really interesting, and this is a piece of advice I would throw out, is I have found that grad schools love data. So when we're talking about, a question was asked earlier about analyzing data, I am not a data scientist. I look at a spreadsheet and I want to cry. But who doesn't is the Kennedy School at Harvard. So I reached out to them and said, hey, I've got all this data. And they jumped out of the university and ran over the river. And we've worked with them, we've worked with Leslie, we've worked with BU now, Boston University as well. And that has really helped our collaborations analyzing our data. And that's ongoing as we do it. I want to talk for a second quickly. I know I'm kind of all over the place, but I want to make sure I say what I want to say. That we do 1 year follow-ups with everyone in our program. Now, we can't get to everyone. Like I said, we serve about 5,000 people a year. But when we originally only did this via internet, and our data was amazing. Like almost everyone had internet access after, well, obviously, because they were using the internet to take the damn survey. So we stopped doing that, and now we do internet, texting, phone. The problem with the phone is people love telling their stories. So we got a group of people together that we were paying to make phone calls, but the problem was the average call time for a 5-question survey was 12 minutes. And that was wonderful. We got great anecdotes and great stories, but man, we paid a lot of money for 12 responses. I also want to reiterate a point that was made earlier about the need to know versus what is good to know. When we were developing our Salesforce system, like I said, it took us about a year and a half. This was a question our developer constantly was asking us, because you don't want your surveys to be too long, especially because we do a intake survey, first class, a post-training survey at the very end, and then, like I said, we do follow-up. I don't want to take any time away from program that isn't necessary. So the shorter those surveys can be, the better it is for us. I also want to recommend that everyone ask their partners and their funders what they want to know. I mentioned earlier the funding piece. I mean, David's up front from Comcast. They've been great with us helping with data. What do these funders want to hear? It's not like you're changing your program. You're just asking for pieces of information that might be able to support you. Partners, too. This is something that's really beneficial in our school-based model, where we actually will reach out to principals and say, all right, we're serving 100 people in your school and their families. What's some information that you would want to know that you don't typically get? And they love that, and we're able to do that as well. Asking your participants what they want to learn is something that really defines what we do. All of our curriculum, we have about 150 different curriculum pods that people learn from. Almost all of them came from recommendations from participants and our trainers. Because what do I know about the lives of the people that we're trying to serve? So yeah, that's basically all I want to say. Salesforce, I like it. I would definitely recommend you talk to Samantha, though, if you don't have $75,000 in your back pocket. That's great. Thank you.
We got time. First, we'll do questions for Dan, and then we'll open it up to more general questions. So, specific questions for Dan. And we got a microphone here. We'll go here and then here. So.
Hi, Dan. I have a question for you about, you talk about serving participants, 1 year later, and knowing that a lot of the communities we serve can be hard to reach and don't have maybe stable form of phone or internet. How are you able to better retain those participants a year down the road and make sure that they are participating in the surveys?
The question was, how do we ensure that, or try to get as many people as possible based on the demographics of who we're supporting? It's a fantastic question. I think it's one of the ways that we deal with it is our model really benefits us. That the way our courses run is that our trainers and our courses all take place in the communities where the people live. So Tech Goes Home courses take place at a child's school. They take place at the community center or the library. So typically those people stay connected to those institutions. In fact, one of the new data points we have is that 80% of the adults that are in our school-based model with their child, it's the very first time they've ever done any activity at their child's school. At the end of the course, 95% say they want to stay involved. So what that does for us is that when our trainers go to help us do these one-year surveys, they can say, hey, did you get this email from Tech Goes Home? Or hey, did you respond to that text message? That said, it is really hard. Like I said, we call everyone, we try to call everyone, we text everyone, we email everyone, we send postcards to everyone. We actually do a lot of time on this because we know how important that data is. But like I said, we really benefit from the fact that our program is run in the neighborhoods where people live. Did that answer the question?
I was just going to ask you if you could give a quick summary of the kinds of programs you actually do.
Sure. So quick summary of what we do. We have 4 basic models. I shouldn't say they're basic. 4 models. We have our school-based model, which is adult, caregiver, and child together for 15 hours of digital skills learning. That takes place at the child's school. Our Tech Goes Home trainers are the classroom teachers of those children. We basically hire them to be Tech Goes Home trainers. It takes place outside of the school day. So I was at a course last Saturday, an early childhood course, or younger kids course at a school. And that really focuses on, how do I check my kids' grades online? How do I email with my child's teacher? How do I use common sense media to look up, my 10-year-old wants to buy Grand Theft Auto and I have no idea what that is, so I'm going to go look up that, no, I don't want my kid paying for prostitutes in a video game, which you can do in Grand Theft Auto. We also have a early childhood model, which is similar in structure to the school model, but it focuses on kids 3 to 6. So that is an iPad-based model. I should have mentioned earlier that at the end of our program, everyone gets a brand new Chromebook for $50, with the exception of our iPad, our early childhood model, which is iPad-based. So instead, they get an iPad preloaded with apps that we've picked. So they get about 100 apps that we've culled and found via different sources, including our local PBS, WGBH actually creates apps. We preload them on there, and then families learn those apps together. So it's child sitting on parent or caregiver's lap learning how to do letter school or whatever it might be. And again, for the same $50 at the end, they get the device. We also have 2 adult-only programs. One we just call our community model, and that is for people 18. Our oldest participant we've ever had is 94 years old. She lived in Boston her whole life, has lived in Boston her whole life. She's still alive. She learned to video chat with her great-grandchildren who live in Atlanta, Georgia. Yeah, she was amazing. She told a story about how she met her husband in 1938, and the class rallied around her, and they scanned in her wedding pictures so she could make this Google presentation that she could share with her family across the country. It was like tears everywhere. And then we have a small business model, which focuses on micro entrepreneurs, and that covers everything you would think, like how do I do a budget? And we typically focus on different groups in the small business model. So for example, one of our biggest cohorts are early child care providers, because they tend not to have lots of supports, and we feel like we can come and give them resources that can improve their program.
Hi. Following up on the 1-year survey process, I think I heard you say that the trainers conduct the survey. I'm wondering what's the staffing resources required?
Forgive me. No, the question was like, do our trainers conduct the surveys? They don't actually conduct the surveys themselves. That would be way too much of a burden on them. They're kind enough to run our program, never mind do a survey. We have, our full-time staff, it was only 6 of us, but we have one person that really takes it on, and then going back to the university thing, interns are amazing. So we bring in, last summer we had an intern from Wellesley and an intern from Tufts, and they basically were in charge of organizing this. And then there's using tools like CallFire. That's just what we use. It's this tool that allows you to text lots of people at once. It's not very expensive. The email piece, we use something as simple as Constant Contact or SurveyMonkey. What's great about that is you can actually see how many people are opening the emails, which is important to us as well. The calls we typically do with volunteers. So for example, Google is a good partner of ours, and we'll buy Googlers a bunch of pizza, and they sit down, and using a Google phone app on their phone, there'll be like 15 of them, and we give them sheets. So we're lucky that we have a very diverse city, so we grab someone who might speak Spanish, someone who speaks Haitian Creole, someone who speaks Mandarin, and we say, okay, here's lists of people to call. And then we try to do that, we'll do it at night, on weekends, during the day, and then see what we get. That's hard though. But it's a great, something we struggle with is opportunities for volunteers. Like they come and volunteer in our courses, which is great, but that's like 15 hours over 2 months. And sometimes people don't want that. But getting people together for 3 hours and actually talking to the people who have an impact. I will say too, that just as a note, of our top 5 individual funders, like people, 2 of them were volunteers before they served before they gave us money. And both have given in the thousands of dollars, and I think part of that is because they were able to have conversations like that with people. I'm sorry?
Do they enter that data straight into
It's actually via something called Form Assembly, which is kind of like Google Forms that feeds directly into Salesforce. It's also all pre-populated for them, so people don't have to enter in any of their own information because they just click on their name and such, so that way there's no mistakes, which is something we dealt with in the past. With Google Forms, like, I'm seeing a lot of people shaking their heads. They don't remember how to spell their name, and they don't know where they live, and they don't know where the course took place. Or there might be multiple spellings of someone's name, or someone's birth date might be off. So just by clicking on the link, it guarantees that when they took the survey in the first class, 18 months later, it's the same person, so that pathway stays intact.
I'd love to follow up on that. I've done a lot of survey work, and just because she's sitting here, I want to kind of single her out. Wanda Davis at Ashbury Senior Community Computer Center. We have a program called SET, which employs older adults that have gone through the digital inclusion training program at Ashbury to conduct our surveys. So if anyone needs survey research, we have a really low cost model to do that. And what we do is actually, if you're using Ditto, that there is a unique identifier for any of the profile data. We enter that in on every survey that we give and take. And it automatically aligns to all of the census data and all of that you were talking about. Gives the same type of input that Dan was describing.
Yeah, and we're happy to take more general questions too. Right here, and we've got a microphone coming over so everybody can hear.
Hi, I'm Carissa from the Providence Public Library, and I can envision this shared national dashboard, Samantha, that you're imagining of our impact or how many people we're serving. But I'm finding sometimes we're the victim of our own success. I don't know, maybe particularly public libraries, but we're going to do the service anyway. We're going to go out and do that service. We do the service in workforce development centers, and they count on us, but we don't get money from them. I have to cobble that together in a million different places. So I wondered, as a researcher and your background in data, Samantha, if you could say a little bit more about how you can use that kind of data to get, I understand you're having a record of achievement, but then it's kind of not showing the need, because we're filling it anyway.
I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the need of our communities?
No, more so that we're doing the service anyway, regardless, without that big national funder or.
Right.
So.
Oh, so, okay, you're thinking, here's the funder, they're like, well, gee, they're already doing it without me, why do they need my help? That's what you're kind of saying. Well, the need in our communities is quite great. It is a really large problem to solve, to really remove digital inequities. And anyone who does this work knows that there's multiple branches. The digital inclusion training piece is just one. There's also access, and there's devices, and all of those things that kind of roll in together. And each community has different challenges, based on the landscape and all of that. Some of you guys have more providers and better low-cost options than others and whatnot. So as far as that need goes, it's kind of a combination of, gee, we really could look at what we can do on a small budget, imagine what we could do on a great budget. And through the using and aligning to, census and ACS data, we know the magnitude of the problem in our communities, right? So if you're training 5,000 people in the last, few years, that's still probably not all of them, right? There's still a steep, and it's a continuing problem. Just because we train someone today doesn't mean that they're going to continue to have the skills they need as technology evolves. So it's about telling that story, and it's about kind of pairing not just our impact data and what we can do on a small budget with the duct tape and the toothpicks, but also showing that there's so much more we could get done, to close that divide and to create economic mobility and economic opportunity and impact our local economies if we had some more support.
So, and let me add another lens to that question too. Is there's a second need that I think everyone on the panel has brought out, is that I like the terminology of using duct tape and a lot of gum and toothpicks to try and hold things together, to say build the airplane as you're moving along. But one of the other important questions is, what about building the right type of institutional capacity, organizational capacity as well, to go beyond where you are today? And so that's where it's important to have good data, not only about what are you doing, but also about those organizational and institutional capacities. And in our call, we talked a bit about how do we document and measure the institutional capacity so we can figure out how to grow that. So it's things like not only getting an instance of Salesforce, but getting the right folks to partner with you to build those customized forms and so forth. And so how do you build that institutional capacity so your institution can sustain what it's doing in the long run as well? I mean, using interns is great, you know, from my own experience, doing a lot of that as well too. But then how do we get to that very next level as well to be able to do that? And also on the tools to continue to co-develop those tools with your user community, as Samantha's talking in this interaction as well too. So there's the institutional capacity and measuring that, and then also being able to tell a story. And it's like talking about the sewer lines within your city. It's not stuff you really talk to unless they break. So, but you got your funders who really need to understand, because that's where they're putting their trust. Because they're looking behind the scenes to say, who's running the show? How are you organized? What's your capacity for growing and growth as an organization, as an institution? So, yeah.
I was wondering, since you have a mic, could you talk to what Central is doing to help digital inclusion efforts in North Carolina?
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to do it. So first, let me introduce you to Leah Krause. Leah is our Chief Information Officer at North Carolina Central and Vice Chancellor. And so Leah was there before I was, and I joined in summer of 16. And the CIO's office has been heavily engaged with Google Fiber, for example, and received a couple of different digital inclusion grants where we've been bringing in a large number of undergraduate and graduate students to come work in the Raleigh-Durham area to do frontline digital training and so forth. It's such a really strong partnership, and we're pulling students from all across campus to be able to do it, which is really great to see. And they're doing and designing the training programs. They're doing like in public housing with seniors and things like that. So those are some of the things that we're doing. We're also involved with the North Carolina Digital Inclusion Committee. Amy Ward was here. I don't see her now. But, you know, I serve on there. Leah's on there as well, too. And I'm actually bringing my experience from when I started Center for Digital Inclusion at University of Illinois to campus. And so we're offering classes where we focus on the library is such an important role. So we're offering, we're expanding our classes. And even in our core classes, we're teaching our Master's Library Science students, you know, how do you go about doing delivering digital inclusion programs from a library perspective and things like that. So. Yep. Yes.
I have a question about what the ethics protocols are. So when you're contacting, you use this for everyone who's collecting data. When you go back like 3 months later and you recontact people, do you need to get their permission ahead of time to do that?
Yeah, let's answer it real quick, and then we see the lunch crews starting to line up. So real.
Is in your ditto and maybe in the other share, do you use the data that other programs are collecting? Like, is it in a secure place? So does each program have secure access to their data?
Yes.
Or is it being shared with third parties?
No.
Yeah, let's answer it. 30 seconds, and then maybe we can break out smaller groups afterwards because we're running late. Yeah.
To the security question, it is 100% encrypted, okay? It's password protected at rest. It's also, there's a disclaimer on our website, so I won't go through the big protocol, but absolutely, we take security extremely seriously. We have dual authentication processes and everything, so your data is your data. If you opt into our data trust, that says that we are, as our organization, will use your data in aggregate only to talk about just basically counting heads, right? And some of the overall demographics nationally. But that is an opt-in. As far as asking permission, yes. In the form, it says permission to text, permission to contact.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry we couldn't answer that more. If you want to talk more about the ethics of collecting the data, it's a very significant issue. We have some at-risk populations where it's a great concern as well, too. But yeah, let's thank our panelists again for this great session. And I guess it's lunchtime now. And thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you,
Yeah,
John.
great job. Thank you.
Appreciate it.